The recently concluded presidential and parliamentary elections in Zimbabwe has captured the attention of the nation and the world alike. The announcement of President Emmerson Mnangagwa's victory and the subsequent allegations of fraud and irregularities have ignited a robust discourse surrounding the electoral process. Declaration of President Mnangagwa's victory was swiftly met with skepticism from opposition quarters led by Nelson Chamisa of the Citizen Coalition Party, who vehemently raised concerns of blatant and gigantic fraud. The subsequent extension of the voting period, coupled with accusations of an uneven playing field, has fueled tensions and underscored the contentious nature of the elections. I am Kemeni Amano. You're welcome to The Square. Before we begin our conversation, we put this package together for you. Take a look.
Of campaigning and days of tension, the winner of the Zimbabwe presidential election was finally declared.
Mnangagwa Emmerson Dambudzo of ZANU-PF party is declared duly elected President of the Republic of Zimbabwe with effect from 26 August 2023.
In what seemed to be a landslide victory for the incumbent president, Emmerson Mnangagwa of the ruling party ZANU-PF, he took 52.6% of the vote compared with 44% for the leader of the main opposition party, Nelson Chamisa. Mnangagwa, while addressing the people, appreciated them for voting him as their president once again.
The elections have come and gone. I'm humbled by the trust and confidence that you, my fellow countrymen and women, have reposed on me to once again serve as president of our great country, Zimbabwe. There are no winners or losers, but one united people of Zimbabwe. Thus far, we have shamed our detractors who wish to see us divided and in harmony. We shall forever remain a united, peace-loving and resilient people.
Meanwhile, opposition party supporters are not happy with the result, as they are convinced that the just concluded elections witnessed a series of electoral malpractices, especially from the ruling party, ZANU-PF, leaders and supporters.
The election observer missions raised and confirmed a series of electoral malpractices which resonate with our own assessments. Number one, the absence of electoral reforms, a flawed and controversial delimitation exercise. Dr. Mumba's unwavering commitment to ensuring transparency in the elections was met with unfortunate threats, including death threats and intimidations, especially from ZANU-PF leaders and supporters.
Analysts describe Zimbabwe's 2023 general election as the worst in the country's history.
These elections, they were, the worst elections ever to be held in Zimbabwe's history, political history of electoral politics. For the first time, these observer missions objectively pointed out to the glaring and brazen-written tactics. Only 11% of participants, as candidates, were women, implying that it was highly, it excluded a critical section of our population.
However, Mnangagwa's victory only meant that the ZANU-PF retained the governmental leadership it had held for 43 years of Zimbabwe's history, since the nation was renamed following independence from white minority rule in 1980.
Here, we're expecting change, development within the country, and economic stability.
Zimbabweans, however, hope the president's second and last term will bring positive dividends to the South African nation.
Now let's have a chat on all that has happened over the last week in Zimbabwe. Joining us right now is Youngerson Matete, who is Director for Project Vote 263. Youngerson, thank you so much for your time. I do want us to start with what the political atmosphere is right now in Zimbabwe. How would you describe it? Well, I do not think Youngerson can hear me at the moment. We'll try and fix that connection. But before we do that, well, my understanding is that Youngerson is back. Youngerson, thank you so much for coming back. I understand that the connection is very bad for obvious reasons. But I was asking earlier to tell us what the political atmosphere is in Zimbabwe today. How would you describe it?
Currently, the political atmosphere is very somber and very tense. We are seeing a lot of political activists who are critical of the government of Emmerson Mnangagwa being abducted during the dead of the night. We are seeing a lot of people who are critics being arrested. Some of them have been disappeared. We don't know some of where our comrades are. We've seen a lot of even civil society members being arrested on the 23rd of August. So the current political atmosphere is tense, and the police and the army has been deployed across the townships, the towns of Zimbabwe, the rural areas to intimidate a lot of people, because what happened on the 26th of August was an electoral fraud, which ended up Zimbabwe having an unelected, undesired, and unwanted president being declared the winner but not being elected. So because of that, they are anticipating that people might demonstrate, people might protest. So they actually deployed military presence, security presence in all of the townships. Some of them they are active, they are going during the night, taking all the activists and human rights defenders during the night. So the atmosphere is quite tense, and a lot of people.
We'll come back to, the atmosphere in a bit, but let's talk about the electoral process, which many of the observers have criticized, and in fact, to an extent of calling it fraudulent, and as the CCC puts it, a gigantic fraud. For me, again, the confusion is around where the fraud occurred. At what point did, where did it become fraudulent? Talk to me about the evidence that backs that description of the elections.
The fraud of the election started in 2020 when the ruling party started to decimate, annihilate the opposition, the legitimate opposition in Zimbabwe, which was then the MDC alliance, using the cause. So that's when the fraudulent of the election started. They started amending the constitution, electing draconian laws such as Patriotic Act, that is making it even difficult for actually Zimbabweans to talk to any, whether media houses or any foreigners, without being criminalized. So we moved during the pre-election environment that was characterized by a lot of weaponization of the law, using the judiciary to persecute activists, to arrest activists, to make sure that the democratic space is shrinked. We have seen the Electoral Commission operating in a very partisan manner, refusing to give other political stakeholders, such as opposition and civil society, the voters' roll, conducting a symbolic voter registration exercise and voter inspection exercise. So these were the steps that they were taking to actually come up with the fraudulent elections. So on the voting day, we see a serious voter suppression that we have never seen since the history of Zimbabwe, where people from urban areas were not allowed to vote. They actually literally deliberately make sure that they don't have material to vote on the voting day on the 23rd of August, even though they say they are going to extend to the 24th of August. But a lot of people have been differentiated. We have to know that Zimbabwe has got 80% of people who survive on informal trading, which are vendors. So what it means that people cannot afford to go 2 days without going to work. So they made sure that they frustrated a lot of people who are in the urban areas,
right,
while they make sure that.
No, go ahead, finish that point, and then I'd follow up on that.
Okay, thank you. So what they did is that they suppressed the voting in urban areas and intimidated voters in rural areas to make sure that they come up with a combination of where they intimidate people in rural areas by beating them, by making sure that they coerce them using village heads, traditional leaders, and then in urban areas, they make sure that people in urban areas do not vote, because Harare is the largest population in Zimbabwe, but they made sure that they do not vote. But they also.
Youngerson, are you still there with us? Well, the connection has tripped again, and we lost Youngerson. But you know, he's been telling us exactly where and how the fraud occurred. Youngerson, finish your point. But while you do that, I do want to talk about the fact that all of these things that you have outlined, the impression has only been created that is only the ZANU-PF or the President Emmerson Mnangagwa's team that benefited from that. Is that what observers see, or is that what observers saw on the ground? The fact that these, if you like, intentional irregularities only benefited the ruling party?
I must say by pointing out that Mr. Mnangagwa in his entire political history, he has never won an election. He used to rely much on the very elect President Robert Gabriel Mugabe, who used to, because he was his former right-hand man, so he used to prop him up. So he himself, as a person, has never won an election, even internal elections within ZANU-PF. That's why he used the military to usurp power in ZANU-PF to remove Robert Mugabe after he had been expelled or lost internal politics within ZANU-PF. So Mr. Mnangagwa has a history of using military personnel to force himself on the people. So he himself is not an electable charlatan. So what they are doing is to make sure that he benefits, because he can never win any free and fair election. Even if he has to contest with a baboon or a monkey, he will never win that election. But the people don't like Mr. Mnangagwa because he is incompetent. He is just an educated man who can't even do things. He's a corrupt man. He works with the mafia. So the people, general people, even those in rural areas, they don't like him. So these all shenanigans, which were by design, so were attempts to make sure that he benefits from irregularities, because he was working with a group that is known as Forever Sources of Zimbabwe, as a sort of an intelligence group that was created to make sure that they rig elections. These are the group that have taken over the operation of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, that has been suppressing voter registration in urban areas, intimidating people in rural areas, and make sure that people in urban areas do not vote. So these all irregularities were meant to benefit Mr. Mnangagwa. That's why even the commission announced the results which has been circulating in Zimbabwe for the last 2 days, which did not even make sense because they don't even add up. If you add up the percentage, there are more than people that have voted. We have the results that were announced by the Electoral Commission adds up to 103%, more than 100%. It has never been seen anywhere in the history of politics or electoral democracy that you add up figures, they come up with more than 100% of voters that have been casted. It's more like a kid was playing with figures. That's how incompetent the guy is. During the Mugabe era, we used to see rigging. That is a bit, that has got a bit of saga. But now we're seeing a brazen vote rigging that has never been seen anywhere. That's the kind of...
Youngerson, despite what you're saying, the president and his team have also said that the election was free and fair and credible. They have gone ahead to even accuse the Triple C party of also conniving with the SADC election observer mission. From where you sit as an observer of the election, was there anything to be questioned, or is there justification for the concerns raised by the ZANU-PF regarding the relationship between SADC election observer mission and the Triple C party?
I must point out this thing is that since 2000, we have had electoral disputes in Zimbabwe, and the SADC and the AU have supported the government. But this time around, the rigging is so brazen. It started during the pre-election period that they produced a delimitation report, which is a redrawing of boundaries of constituencies and wards, which are in violation of our own constitution, not to talk about the SADC guidelines and principles of democratic elections and the EU Charter on Good Governance and Democracy. They violated their own constitution. They politically gerrymandered and malapportioned in such a manner that is quite shocking, but not surprising, because these guys have been used to cheat elections. They have been denying legitimate opposition political parties and civil society groups the voters' roll, which is the manual of any election that contains the registers of people. So all those things.
Well, it looks like Youngerson's connection is gone off again, but we'll bring him back and then he'll finish that point just before we move into other matters on the table today. Remember that President Emmerson Mnangagwa, according to Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission, is the winner of the recently concluded elections, and he has been given the nod for a second term. As far as ZEC is concerned, we know that the Triple C party has already raised concerns about the conduct of the elections. Despite all of these questions being raised about the election results, we know that congratulatory messages are pouring in fast and thick for President Emmerson Mnangagwa. Zambia's president, Hikalema, has sent in his congratulatory messages. ANC's Secretary General, Fikile Mbalula, has also sent in his congratulatory messages. Namibia's president, Gengob, has also sent in his congratulatory messages. Despite all that is going on in the country at the moment, let's check Youngerson's line again and figure out if he's joined us. Youngerson, if you can hear us, I want us to talk about SADC a bit more, but if you could direct the question for me, do you feel that there was an unhealthy relationship between SADC and the Triple C party? Because that is what ZANU-PF is saying. The reason it mentions that some observers were cooking up results. Youngerson, you're muted.
I'm not muted.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. I was saying my apologies for this continuous network disruption. We are having a lot of internet suppression in Zimbabwe.
I understand.
So one thing that I've mentioned is that ZANU-PF as a party used to enjoy a relationship with SADC, that they used to endorse previous elections, which were very much flawed since 2000. That we still have a court application that was done in 2002 by the late Morgan Tsvangirai, who was leader of the MTC. That has not been decided up to today. So during the Mugabe era, the AU and the SADC used to respect Mugabe. And also, most importantly, the rigging that used to be done by Mugabe was a bit sophisticated. What you have seen during Mr. Mnangagwa's days is so brazen, an incompetent form of rigging that is even embarrassing to the SADC community, to the AU community. So there's no relationship between the SADC observer mission and the Triple C. But what is on the ground, anyone can see that this childish form of rigging, a schoolboy form of rigging that was done by Mr. Mnangagwa and his government, that anyone can actually even dispute. So there's no form of any relationship between the opposition or civil society in Zimbabwe.
Very well. I just want to tell our viewers that the plan for today's program was to have the ZANU-PF's Director of Information and Publicity, Tafazo Amugwadi, and the national spokesperson for the Citizen Coalition for Change, Promise Mokananzi. Both of them, unfortunately, we are unable to reach. Would like to believe it's because of the connection problem in Zimbabwe today. But we have Youngerson here, so let's continue our conversation with Youngerson. Youngerson, earlier we talked about observers who had been arrested, as the government says, for cooking up results or for going beyond their mandate. Those were the words that the president used. Where are they now? What are they being charged with exactly? And tell us what's going on.
So on the 23rd of August, during the night, when elections were going on, the police surrounded a lot of observers in Harare, arresting them for planning to announce elections ahead of the commission. So the Electoral Act in Zimbabwe only mandates the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to announce results. But what surprises us here in Zimbabwe is that ZANU-PF through Patrick Sinamasa, who is a member of the Politburo, the highest decision-making committee in ZANU-PF, announced results, fake results, on the 25th of August, saying that ZANU-PF is won this election with 65%, but he has never been arrested. So what we are seeing in Zimbabwe is selective application of the law. We have Job Scala, who is still in prison for more than a year without being tried for representing a client.
We lost the connection again, but Youngerson there was making a valid point about the post-elections events that have taken place in Zimbabwe. If you're just joining us, that's the conversation we're having today. The Triple C Party, the Citizen Coalition for Change Party, that had initially, in the thick of the election, had said that they are comfortably in the lead, are now raising questions about the legitimacy of the win handed to President Emmerson Mnangagwa. The ZANU-PF party, on the other hand, is asking that if they do have concerns about the results declared, they should go to the court. Whether or not there could be enough confidence in the judicial system to look closely and critically at the concerns of the Triple C party and any other member of the Zimbabwean community that has raised questions about the legitimacy of the elections. That's also a conversation we hope to have with Youngerson. You recall that after the 2018 elections, there were also judicial processes that took place after that, which reaffirmed Emmerson Mnangagwa's win. We know that Emmerson Mnangagwa has endorsed the ZEC's announcement of his win. He said the election was free, fair, and credible. And he hopes that the people who do not think it was so can go to the right quarters. And by that, obviously, he means the courts. Let's try Youngerson again. Youngerson, if you can hear us, you were making a point about observers who had been arrested. Quickly wrap up on that point for me so we talk about post-election reforms.
In that the observers were arrested on suspicion that they're going to announce results ahead of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, which is the only mandate to announce results in Zimbabwe. But we have seen Patrick Chinamasa, a member of ZANU-PF, we have announced the fake results on television, captured with a lot of media houses, announced the fake results, but up to now he has not been arrested. But we've got members of observers being arrested for plotting to announce fake results. Maybe they were prophesying sort of, maybe they're saying, you are going to commit a crime, so we are going to arrest you. But someone has already committed the crime, has not been arrested. I see. So this is a selective application of the law.
I see. So Youngerson, I want to be as objective as possible. Now, there were irregularities, many of which, you know, some of you have said were intentional irregularities to skew the election results in favor of the ZANU-PF. However, my question to you is, are there alternative results to show that the winner as announced, it's not supposed to be the winner? Because there could be irregularities, but perhaps the result is correct. Have you considered that?
So what was happening and what members of civil society and the opposition political party, because the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission has challenged us as civil society to do our own parallel tabulation, we were doing our own parallel tabulation of results until we started being hunted down, that we started running away because we were afraid of being abducted and disappeared. And also, the opposition from their own side, they're claiming that they have got a primary residue or electoral residue that points out to electoral violations. But be that as it may, we are looking at the electoral processes, not only the figures that were produced. Because like I indicated earlier, is that we saw a lot of intimidation raw areas where people are being coerced to say they vote for ZANU-PF. Right. People are being commanded by a certain political party to say that they're not able to write and seek for assistance, what is called assisted voters. We saw a lot of civil society, political parties not being given the voters' roll, and all those shenanigans that happened during the voting day. So because the process on its own was not legitimate, can never produce a legitimate result.
Very well. Youngerson, what would you know? We'll take a quick break. When we come back, let's discuss electoral reforms. Let's discuss whether or not people could trust the judicial system and go to court as they are asking. Let's also talk about how we can better protect observers in future elections. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back. Our discussions on the square today border around Zimbabwe's 2023 elections and the events that are taking place since it concluded over the weekend. Still with us is Youngerson Matete, his director, Project Vote 263. Youngerson, thank you so much for your patience and staying with us here on the square. Now, let's talk about ZANU-PF asking Triple C and any other person who claims that there were some fraudulent activities during the elections to go to the right quarters. By that, I believe they're talking about the court. We know that in 2018, when similar was done, 2018-2019, when similar was done, the courts reaffirmed the position of ZEC. Is there any reason why people may not want to go to the courts for, I mean, given the fact that, you know, analysts have said that the police are working for the incumbent, ZEC now, they say ZEC is also working for the incumbent. Is there any reason people would want to go to the courts?
Court. Because after the 2018 elections, like you rightly say, that there was an electoral petition. So after the electoral petition is that the ZANU-PF or the ruling party went on to amend the Constitution of Zimbabwe through the Constitutional Amendment Act 1 and 2 that says that gives the tenure of judges, members of the bench to the ruling elite. So what is happening is that the ruling elite are the ones that appoints judiciary members or the justice at their own privilege. So the justice or the judiciary as it is, the courts are actually even captured in Zimbabwe. That's why you see that post-elections, we have got a candidate that wanted to contest for the president here in Zimbabwe, who is Xavier Kasukwere, a former member of ZANU-PF, who was thrown away during the coup days and sent to exile. But the court denied him the opportunity to participate by the fair fact that he was living outside Zimbabwe. It's something that violates constitutional right, his constitutional right. And the Constitutional Court went on to say, because of that, they've dismissed his case because of technical issues. So the courts in Zimbabwe were captured post the coup in Zimbabwe. So it doesn't make sense to go to the courts, or even the Constitutional Court, wherever that you go. You know that people that are there are cronies and friends of ZANU-PF, the ruling elite. So going just there is just for academic purposes. But you're never going to get any reprieve that make any sense. Even in 2018, where figures did not even make sense, Mr. Mnangagwa was declared a winner without the court knowing that with exactly what figure Mnangagwa is won the election, but they just said yes, won. And people were saying, but what is the figure that Mnangagwa is won the election with? The court can't tell, but they went on to declare. So people have got a legitimate reason not to go to the court. And I actually believe that it's a political suicide for anyone to go to the court. They will be able to legalize the regime of Emmerson Mnangagwa that is committed in electoral fraud in 2023. So this requires a political solution, not a legal solution.
Well, so, you know, it sounds like a lost cause. Is that what you would say this is, particularly for the Triple C?
It is not a lost cause per se. But what I'm saying is they should not go to the courts, because if they go to the courts, they would have legalized the regime of Emmerson Mnangagwa, and the international community to accept the position of the courts. What we need to do using through the SADC, the AU, is to ensure that we have political dialogue that leads to free and fair elections. We need a political solution to the Zimbabwean crisis. The courts and the current setup cannot deliver or cannot solve the Zimbabwean crisis, because they are already captured, and no sane person will believe them.
So what does a political solution look like?
The political solutions looks like we need to have dialogue. That's number one. You need to ensure that we have political and electoral reforms in Zimbabwe that are.
Well, there we go again. But he's talking about what a political solution looks like. He's talked about dialogue, and he was just about making the point on electoral reforms when we lost that connection. But Zimbabwe, as a country, as he told us, you know, the political atmosphere is tense at the moment as people are trying to soak in the reality that they have another 5 years of Emerson Mnangagwa. And then for some others, it may be a good thing because the ZANU-PF also has quite a wide support base in Zimbabwe. Let's go back to Youngerson, Matete. Youngerson, you were making the point about what a political solution looks like, and you were talking about electoral reforms. Go on from there.
Okay, I was saying that because for the last 20 years, Zimbabwe has dragged SADC, has dragged the African Union, because by continuously having a political crisis that has led to an economic crisis, we have seen Zimbabwe flooding across Africa, across the world, also disturbing or also causing unnecessary pressure in other countries' economies. Because of that, we need now to have a solution. The solution that we can have is to make sure that we have a dialogue that necessitates political and electoral reforms in Zimbabwe that can ensure that we have free and fair elections. But this dialogue has to be guaranteed by the SADC, the AU, or even the United Nations to that level if it fails, so that we can say, or we can have a free and fair election. Because under the current circumstances, you can never have a free and fair elections in Zimbabwe. And there's no reprieve if you can't go to the courts, but the courts are corrupted, the courts have been captured, that the people of Zimbabwe do not even have faith with the courts or even the institutions in Zimbabwe, but they have served for, or they are serving on behalf of a certain political ruling elite. So what we need now is to have a dialogue to ensure that we have reforms that can lead to free and fair elections in Zimbabwe. Because in 2018, the observer missions recommended 232 electoral reforms, but not even a single one has been done by the regime of Emerson Mnangagwa. But if those reforms has been done, we could have been a free and fair elections here in 2023. But 5 years later,
and that's what I want to talk to you about, because at the end of the day, whoever sits in that chair as the #1 person in Zimbabwe may have to be the one to initiate those electoral reforms. And like you've said, previous ones have not been implemented. Where's the hope that, you know, that dialogue analysts and stakeholders like yourself are asking for will happen this time? How can the Zimbabwean people go around that?
The hope that we have currently, like in any other electoral cycle, is that the SADC, the AU, and the United Nations have taken a position that is in favorable of the people of Zimbabwe. That has never happened before. So this is where our hope lies, that we are going to continue lobbying the SADC in particular to make sure that beyond just taking a position, we need to have concrete steps to ensure that the situation in Zimbabwe is resolved. So that's where our hope as a country lies, in to say SADC, AU, and United Nations have taken a position against the ruling elite in Zimbabwe, or for the betterment of Zimbabwe. So beyond taking a position, let's now come up with concrete steps that can ensure free and fair elections in Zimbabwe, because the people of Zimbabwe deserve a better leadership, deserve the leadership of their choice, deserve to freely and choose leaders. They deserve dignity. As the Zimbabweans, I've traveled across the world. Because you come from Zimbabwe, no matter how brilliant we are as Zimbabweans, we have lost dignity, have lost respect. So these people of Zimbabwe, beyond being robbed of election, they've been robbed of dignity. They've been robbed of livelihoods. We are talking about generations that have been killed, that have been destroyed since 1980 because of bad economic policies, because of bad governance by the ruling elite, by the ZANU-PF. So the people of Zimbabwe, more than anything else, they deserve dignity. They deserve to have their lives restored. We have a Kukraoni that was done in Matete during the 1980s that has not been resolved. We have people who are living in trauma because of people that have been killed by the political elite who need closure in their lives. So all those people deserve dignity, they deserve closure. So the SADC, AU, and United Nations, beyond taking a position, they should now ensure that there are steps that should be taken to ensure that there is free and fair elections that leads to reconciliation, a rebuilding of Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe was once a vibrant economy that was a breadbasket of Africa. We need to make sure that we have taken Zimbabwe back to its former glory.
Well, Youngerson there. Now, when Youngerson comes back, we would look at what all of these mean for the ordinary Zimbabwean. What does it mean for the security of the country in the next few days, given that people are impassioned about the outcome of the results, and a lot needs to be done to keep things in check and in place in Zimbabwe. Unfortunately, Youngerson cannot come back, but we wish Zimbabweans all the best. That'll be all for today. Thank you so much for your company. I hope to see you here again same time tomorrow for another discussion on Africa. My name is Kemeni Amano. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.